In a world where the sun set on civilization, Major Elena Carter stood on the cracked rooftop of an old government building, her eyes scanning the horizon. What used to be a bustling city was now a desolate landscape, overrun by endless hordes of the undead. Buildings crumbled, streets lay buried beneath debris, and the sky was an eerie shade of red from countless fires burning day and night. The world had fallen into chaos, and Major Carter was one of the few left standing to fight for what remained of humanity. Elena had been a seasoned military commander, leading operations in war zones around the globe, but nothing had prepared her for this. The zombie apocalypse had spread like wildfire, turning millions into flesh-eating monsters within weeks. Governments had collapsed, and order had disintegrated. Only scattered military units, survivalists, and desperate civilians remained to fight for survival. Elena's unit, Echo Company, was one of the last organized military forces still holding their ground. Stationed in the heart of what had once been New York City, their mission was to defend a fortified zone known as the Bastion, a makeshift fortress built around a key research facility. Inside, a team of scientists worked tirelessly to develop a cure, a last hope for humanity. The fate of the world rested on their shoulders, and it was up to Echo Company to protect them at all costs. The days had been relentless, but the nights were worse. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the air filled with an unsettling quiet. It was the calm before the storm. The undead were nocturnal predators, more active and aggressive under the cover of darkness. As the last light faded, Elena knew they were coming. She called down to her troops below, Echo Company, to your positions. It's going to be a long night. Her soldiers scrambled into action, manning the barricades, checking weapons, and reinforcing defenses. They were a small force, just 50 soldiers, but they were battle-hardened and determined. They had survived countless attacks before, but the zombie hordes never seemed to end. Every wave they fought off was replaced by an even larger one, drawn by the scent of the living. As the first groans and shuffling footsteps echoed through the darkened streets, Elena grabbed her rifle and joined her team on the front lines. The undead emerged from the shadows, their pale, decaying forms moving in a relentless wave toward the fortress. Their eyes, empty and soulless, glowed with a sickly yellow hue, and their twisted mouths gnashed hungrily at the air. Hold your fire until they're in range. Elena ordered, her voice calm but commanding. The zombies advanced slowly at first, a tide of death creeping ever closer. Then, as if driven by some unseen force, they broke into a sprint, their grotesque forms surging forward with terrifying speed. The soldiers opened fire, the night exploding with the sound of gunfire, but the zombies kept coming. For every one that fell, 10 more took its place. The fighting was brutal. Elena and her soldiers fired until their weapons overheated, reloaded, and fired again. They threw grenades into the densest parts of the horde, sending bodies flying, but the undead seemed endless. Wave after wave crashed against their defenses, each one testing the limits of the soldiers' endurance. Amidst the chaos, a warning crackled over the radio. Major Carter, this is Sergeant Lopez. We've got breaches on the east side. They're breaking through. Elena cursed under her breath. They couldn't afford to lose the east barricade, it was their weakest point, and if the undead got through, the entire fortress could fall. Hold the line. I'm on my way. She sprinted toward the breach, rallying a squad to follow. When they arrived, the sight was horrific. Zombies had torn through a section of the barricade and were pouring into the courtyard. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand, slashing and stabbing with bayonets and knives, but they were being overwhelmed. Elena fought with a ferocity she didn't know she had. She swung her rifle like a club, bashing in the heads of zombies as they closed in around her. Her squad moved in tandem, forming a tight circle, but the undead were relentless. One by one, her soldiers fell, dragged down by the horde. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a roar filled the air, a sound so loud and powerful that it shook the ground. Elena looked up and saw a massive armored vehicle, a remnant of the old military, plowing through the horde. Mounted on top was a heavy machine gun, spitting out streams of bullets that tore through the zombies like paper. Reinforcements had arrived. With the help of the new unit, Echo Company was able to drive back the horde, pushing them out of the fortress and sealing the breach. When the battle was finally over, the courtyard was littered with bodies, both human and undead. The survivors were exhausted, but they had won another night. As dawn broke, Elena stood amidst the wreckage, covered in blood and grime. She looked out at the horizon, knowing that this was far from over. The undead would return, and the fight would continue. But for now, they had held the line. They had bought humanity one more day, one more chance to find a cure. And as long as she was still standing, Major Elena Carter would keep fighting. Because in this world of darkness and death, she knew that survival wasn't just about staying alive, it was about protecting hope, no matter the cost. The sun rose slowly over the shattered remains of the city, casting long shadows over the battlefield. Major Elena Carter leaned heavily against a crumbling wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The survivors of Echo Company were busy reinforcing their defenses and gathering what little ammunition they had left. Bodies, both undead and human, were being cleared from the courtyard, but the stench of death lingered in the air. Elena's radio crackled to life, interrupting her brief moment of rest. Major Carter, this is Captain Reed from the Vanguard Unit. We're pulling up to your position with more supplies and reinforcements. Elena straightened, wiping sweat and blood from her face. Vanguard was one of the few remaining elite military units, a mobile strike force known for their heavy armor and devastating firepower. Their arrival meant that Command still had faith in the Bastion and in the research facility they were protecting. But it also meant that the threat was far from over. Copy that, Captain Reed, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. We'll need all the help we can get. The undead breached our east barricade last night. We're shoring it up, but we can't take another hit like that. As the convoy of armored vehicles rolled into the fortress, Elena made her way to greet Captain Reed. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, his face hardened by years of combat. He stepped out of the lead vehicle, his eyes scanning the surroundings before locking onto Elena. Major Carter, Reed said, extending his hand. We've been hearing about the work you've been doing here. Impressive, considering the odds. Elena shook his hand firmly. We're doing what we can, Captain. But it's getting worse. The hordes are larger, more coordinated, almost like something's driving them. Reed frowned. We've seen the same thing on our way here. There's been a spike in activity across all sectors. Command believes there may be something controlling the zombies, a central force. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of a mindless horde was terrifying enough, but the thought of an intelligence behind them? That was something else entirely. Do we have any intel on this central force? She asked. Reed nodded. Not much. Scouts reported seeing a strange signal near the ruins of the Old World Trade Center. They couldn't get close enough to investigate, but whatever it is, it's been drawing the undead in massive numbers. Elena clenched her jaw. If that signal is controlling the hordes, we need to destroy it. We can't keep holding out against an endless army. We're barely surviving as it is. Reed agreed. Command has authorized an assault. Vanguard will lead the charge, and we'll need Echo Company to provide support. This is a high-risk mission, Major. But if we succeed, we might just turn the tide. Elena nodded. There was no choice. The Bastion wouldn't survive another night like the last one, and if there was even a chance to weaken the undead, they had to take it. The mission was set for that evening. As the sun dipped low in the sky once more, Elena gathered her troops. They had survived countless battles, but this one felt different. The weight of the mission hung over them like a storm cloud, and Elena could see the exhaustion in their faces. But there was also determination. They knew what was at stake. Listen up, Elena called out as her soldiers gathered around. Tonight, we're taking the fight to them. We've survived wave after wave, and now we have a chance to hit them where it hurts. We're going to push through the horde, find the source of that signal, and destroy it. I won't lie to you, this is going to be our toughest fight yet. But we've faced impossible odds before, and we're still standing. We're going to make sure the rest of humanity gets that same chance. Her words lit a fire in her troops. Weapons were loaded, armor was checked, and soon, the convoy was on the move. Elena rode with Captain Reed in the lead vehicle, watching as the darkened streets of the city passed by. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat. As they approached the ruins of the World Trade Center, they encountered the first wave of undead. The zombies swarmed out of side streets and alleys, driven by that same unnatural coordination Elena had witnessed before. Vanguard's armored vehicles plowed through the horde, their heavy machine guns cutting down the undead in waves, but still, they kept coming. Push forward. Reed ordered over the comms. We need to reach the source of that signal. Elena and her team fought with everything they had, bullets tearing through the horde, grenades lighting up the night sky. But for every zombie they took down, more appeared. It was like fighting an ocean, no matter how many waves they repelled, the tide kept surging back. Then, in the distance, Elena saw it, a strange tower-like structure, pulsing with an eerie blue light. It stood amidst the rubble of the old world, a twisted, metallic construct that seemed out of place, almost alien. And surrounding it were thousands of zombies, all drawn to the light like moths to a flame. That's it. Reed shouted. That's the source. Focus fire on that tower. Elena ordered. We take that down, and we might just survive this. The convoy surged forward, cutting through the horde with everything they had. Rockets fired from Vanguard's vehicles, slamming into the tower and causing it to shudder. But it wasn't enough. The tower remained standing, and the horde seemed to grow even more frenzied, throwing themselves at the vehicles with reckless abandon. Elena knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They needed to get closer, plant explosives, and destroy the tower from within. She turned to Reed. We need to go in on foot. It's the only way. Reed nodded grimly. Agreed. We'll cover you. Get it done. With that, Elena gathered a small team and leaped from the vehicle, charging through the sea of undead. It was a desperate dash, every step a battle for survival. Her rifle barked as she fired, clearing a path, but the zombies were everywhere. One grabbed her by the arm, its decayed fingers digging into her skin, but she ripped free and kept moving. Finally, they reached the base of the tower. Elena planted the explosives, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She set the timer for 30 seconds and shouted to her team, "Fall back. Now!" They sprinted back through the horde, fighting their way to safety. The seconds ticked down, and just as they reached the safety of Vanguard's line, the explosives detonated. The tower erupted in a blinding flash of light, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The blue light flickered, then vanished, and with it, the zombies seemed to falter, their movements becoming sluggish and disoriented. The horde began to collapse, one by one, as if the life had been drained from them. Elena watched in disbelief as the tide of undead finally broke, leaving the battlefield eerily quiet. They had done it. The source of the signal was destroyed, and the horde was broken. The night was theirs. As the first rays of dawn broke over the city, Elena stood with Captain Reed, surveying the aftermath. They had lost many good soldiers, but they had survived. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. "This isn't the end," she said quietly. "But it's a beginning. We can rebuild. We can fight back." Reed nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "And we will. One step at a time." Elena looked out at the city, battered but still standing, and knew that the fight was far from over. But with every battle they won, humanity took back a little more of what had been lost. And as long as there were people willing to stand and fight, there was always hope.